Councillors, ladies and gentlemen, please be upstanding for the Mayor of the City of Clarence, Councillor Brendan Longley.
Well, hello, welcome all. Before proceeding, I pay my respects to the Mumarinera people as the traditional and original custodians of the lands on which we meet, and I acknowledge the continuing connection of the Tasmanian Aboriginal people to the skies, land and waterways. I pay respect to elders past and present. Before we commence with tonight's council meeting, please let us all pause for a quiet moment of reflection and respect. Thank you, councillors. Please be seated. Well, good evening and welcome to the Clarence City Council meeting of Monday the 17th of July 2023. This meeting is being broadcast live on YouTube, and what is said in this meeting is not protected by privilege, and there is a link to the agenda papers on Council's website. Item number 2, apologies. Councillor Bree Hunter has a leave of absence and Councillor James Walker is an apology this evening. And it's wonderful to see Councillor Goyne with us. Item number 3, declarations of interest of councillors or close associates. Are there any declarations from councillors? Councillor James.
Yes, Mr Mayor. The first item on the planning regarding 7 Mile Beach.
7.1? Yes.
7.1, I declare an interest.
Thank you, Councillor James. There being no others, I move now on to a statement that I'd like to make. At the last council meeting on the 26th of June, I had to adjourn the meeting briefly during question time. To avoid any further uncertainty, I wish to provide a brief outline of the meeting procedures as they relate to questions. A copy of the procedures for public question time can be found on Council's website or by request from the Council officers. We'll also include a link in the relevant section of the Council agenda from now on. Public question time provides an opportunity for people to ask questions about Council's activities, not make statements. Anyone wishing to address Council or make a statement may do so under the deputation section of the Council meeting agenda. As chairperson, I may refuse to accept a question, and if I do, I will provide reasons for that. Equally, I may indicate that I will take a question on notice. The meeting procedures provide several grounds upon which a question can be refused. It is important that we are all familiar with those grounds. It is also important to recognise that it is an offence to disrupt a meeting. If the chairperson gives a direction, that must be followed. It is not appropriate to debate directions from the chairperson or to refuse those directions. I hope that this overview assists to clarify the meeting procedures and requirements. Tonight's agenda includes 2 notices of motion related to the voice referendum. I've been advised by Councillor Moulder and by Councillor Warren that those items have been withdrawn. Can I please ask both Councillors Moulder and Councillor Warren that they confirm their withdrawals? Councillor Moulder. Thank you, Councillor Moulder. Thank you, Councillor Warren. Those withdrawals will be noted in the minutes. There is a further urgent motion for consideration tonight. It relates to the 42-day rule applied to planning applications and its operation. A copy of the motion is provided on the desk in front of you, and the motion is that pursuant to the provisions of Regulation 8 of the Local Government Meeting Procedures Regulations 2015, the Council gives leave of the meeting to consider an urgent item in Section 9 of the agenda regarding the 42-day rule applying to planning applications. Can I please have a mover?
So moved, Mr.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. May I have a seconder, please? Thank you, Councillor Goyne. We'll actually have the procedural motion to have this considered at item number 9 in our agenda this evening. And as this is a procedural motion, colleagues, there is no debate. We also need...
Sorry, excuse me, Mayor, I do have a point of order, if I may. Because this is an urgency motion, and as you mentioned, it refers to number 8 of the regs, there are 3 criteria that must be met. So can we have assurance from the General Manager, the CEO, that he considers this to be urgent so that we can make a fully formed decision when we get to that point?
Thank you, Councillor Warren. CEO?
Thank you. The requirements, as I recall them, and I haven't got them in front of me, relate to qualified advice and other elements. We certainly have taken advice internally. Is there any other element that you would like me to address?
So there are three things. The General Manager has reported the reason that it was not possible to include the matter on the agenda, and the General Manager has reported that the matter is urgent, and in a case where the matter requires the advice of a qualified person, the General Manager has certified under Section 65 of the Act that the advice has been obtained and taken into account in providing general advice to the Council. So I think we've covered A and C, but not B.
Can you just repeat B to me again, please?
So B is the General Manager has reported that the matter is urgent.
Thank you. The urgency in relation to the matter is to deal with essentially, as I understand it, the issue would have otherwise come to Council tonight, and an explanation for the community and a pathway forward was deemed to be urgent.
So there's a motion for the chair. Councillor Warren, happy to take this offline. You can always vote against the procedural motion if you don't believe that it's urgent. That, of course, is your right. But I'll put the motion, and that is all those in favour of this being considered as agenda item number 9 this evening. All those in favour? That's a majority. Thank you. Now we head into our omnibus items. First one is 4.1, confirmation of the minutes. The minutes of the council meeting held on the 26th of June 2023 have been circulated. Are there any issues arising? There being none, we move now on to 4.2, Mayor's Communications. My diary entries from the 27th of June through to today have been circulated, as well as the Deputy Mayor and Councillor Hume representing me at different events. Moving now on to council workshops, 4.3 as listed in the agenda. 4.4, tabling of petitions. CEO, are there any petitions?
Thank you, Mayor. No, there are no petitions tonight.
Thank you. Moving now on to Councillor Mulder. Well, we covered that at 4.6. We're only at 4.4. Thank you. I'll give you the call when you come to there. 4.5, reports from outside bodies. There's nothing to report from either the Copping Refuse Disposal Site Joint Authority, Taswater Corporation or the Greater Hobart Committee. Colleagues, are there any other reports from council and special committees and other representative bodies?
Yes, Mr Mayor.
Councillor Kennedy.
I'd like to table the reports of the Barreve Community Arts Centre meeting for Wednesday the 12th of July. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you, Councillor Kennedy. Are there any other reports? Moving now on to 4.6, weekly briefing reports. Weekly briefing reports of the 26th of June, the 3rd and the 10th of July 2023 have been circulated to councillors. Councillor Mulder.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I have two issues. The first one is a question relating to the weekly briefing report dated the 10th of July, where there are questions about the item, the housing land supply order of 223. And that particular memo advises us that the Clarence local provision schedule maps were amended by the state on the 14th of June 2023 in accordance with a ministerial direction pursuant to the Housing Land Supply Act. This rezoning by ministerial direction is not unheard of, but it is a little unusual. I'm just wondering, did that matter ever come before council? I don't seem to recall it coming before council to be consulted upon whether we were in favour of this or not.
Thank you, Councillor Mulder. CEO.
I'll need to take that on notice, Councillor Mulder. I do recall circulating some information from the Minister quite a while ago, but I'll just need to go and reflect on that and pull it all together.
Anything else, Councillor Mulder?
My second point relates to the 42 Kira Road, which we were expecting to come here, to Kira Road development, which we were expecting to come here but didn't. On the same weekly briefing report, the standard item, applications approved, refused by delegation, has the period 28th of June and ending the 11th of July. Now, I understood that particular development application was approved by was approved by delegation on the 10th of July. As such, it should have appeared here, and I can understand why it wouldn't. What I'm simply asking for is a clerk's correction so that the official record does have the fact that it was done so.
My understanding, and Ms Olsen can correct that through you, Mayor, was that the actual decision was made on the 12th of July, which missed the time frame.
Anything else, Councillor Mulder? Thank you. Councillor James.
Mr Mayor, on the 10th of July, in relation to current enforcement and infringement, I refer to the item Cleanaway Proprietary Limited at a 101 1106 Cambridge Road, Cambridge, unapproved use and development. That infringement notice was issued on the 24th of February. Firstly, Cleanaway is our contractor, as I understand it, for handling the general waste and recycling. So could I just have some indication as to why an infringement notice has been issued to a
It's
a
the CEO
council
can answer that.
provider?
Thank you, Councillor James.
Thank you, Councillor James. Through you, Mayor. An infringement notice was issued under the planning scheme because Cleanaway were using the site without a development application. We issued that notice within a week or so of actually becoming aware of it. And since that time, Cleanaway have been working on a development application for another site, and we've been in constant contact with them. We have a time frame of 6 months in which to progress that infringement or withdraw it. So we are still within that time frame at this point.
Thank you,
In
Councillor James.
relation to that, would the CEO please advise us of that actual site that pertains to that infringement notice, please?
Yes, I can't recall the actual address, but it is on the corner of Cambridge Road and the new Richmond Bypass Road where the roundabout is. It's on that corner.
Thank you, Councillor James. Are there any other matters that colleagues would like to raise? Right, they're being done. I note that we're at the end of our omnibus items. Can I have a mover of the omnibus motion, please? Thank you, Councillor Hume. Seconded, Councillor Kennedy. All those in favour? Thank you. Now moving on to public question time. Before we commence public question time, I remind everyone of my earlier statement this evening. Public questions on notice, as listed in the agenda. There's a question, sorry, lost my page here. There's two questions from Mr Bradley Walker of Howrah. CEO, thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. The first question, I'll read it out for those watching online. First question from Mr Walker was, Council recently approved its 23-24 budget, included a capital project in Rugby Hills. This project includes the construction of a new pathway and track from the Fair Isle Terrace and Cunha Reserve. A portion of this track would be in alignment with a section of track that permit conditions for SD 2011/30 require the developer to construct. Has this been taken into account, and what part is the developer contributing to this project? Mr Graham, I believe, has an answer for that.
Through you, Mr Mayor, just due to relevant staff members being away from the office at the time of receiving this question, and in order to meet the agenda time, an answer will be provided at the next council meeting.
Thank you, Mr Graham. The second question from Mr Walker.
Mr Walker's second question is, Council recently approved its 23-24 budget, excluding the long-running hard waste collection. Council also chose to approve the Mornington transfer station increase of some 30% to disposal fees, including recyclable materials. These two charges will increase the already problematic illegal dumping that occurs within the Clarence region. Does Council have the resources, community awareness, funds to deal with this increase and/or any future strategy, or will these dumpings become something that we'll just have to live with? Again, Mr Graham has a response.
Thank you.
Through you, Mr Mayor, Council's budget does not include a hard waste collection for this coming year. Council was faced with a likely bill of close to $1 million to deliver the service, with no viable operator even able to deliver it. We had to consider the strategic direction of Council and whether a hard waste service aligns with our sustainability goals. It was decided by Council that it didn't. The priority now is to encourage reuse and a circular economy. Most councils have stopped delivering a hard waste service, and the two reasons above are evidence as to why that is the case. We know this will be disappointing for some, but we want to be leaders in the sustainability space and will focus our investment on positive measures like partnerships with the Garage Sale Trail and other initiatives that will encourage reuse and recycling. Council has budgeted $100,000 in the 23-24 financial year to specifically address illegal rubbish dumping. In addition to Council employed a manager of waste this year who is working on updating Clarence's waste and resource recovery strategy. Council is also liaising with the EPA and the recently formed Southern Tasmanian Regional Waste Authority, which is developing a litter management plan for a framework to address this issue in the region.
Thank you, Mr Graham. And there's a question on notice from Mrs Joanne Marsh.
Thank you, Mayor. The question from Mrs Marsh is, would the Mayor please address the meeting about how public question time will be understood and managed in the future to ensure that this meeting is a safe place for everyone?
Thank you. My opening statement tonight can be taken as my answer to that question. Moving now on to answers to previous questions taken on notice. There's one there from Mrs Marsh as listed in the agenda. Now move on to 5.4, questions without notice. Are there any questions from the gallery? Name and address, please.
No worries. I actually did do a question on notice, but it must have been missed by the staff. David Beard, 44 Pindos Drive, Tranmere. Mr Mayor and councillors and aldermen, firstly, thank you to the aldermen that have got back to me and councillors in respect to my correspondence. There wasn't a lot that got back to me, but I'm really thankful that a few of you listened. As I said, I'm here representing the Tranmere residents and particularly...
Mr Beard, I have to ask you to put your question, please.
I'm here representing the Tranmere residents and children, and I understand that on tonight's agenda there is an item in regards to the letting of the tender for the Pindos Park. As you're aware, Tranmere residents are keen to see progress on Pindos Park. There was again promised and again, as of the end of June, not delivered in the year it was budgeted.
Mr Beard,
we are also requesting...
excuse me, Mr Beard,
yes.
I'm sorry, I'm sorry, but as I outlined at the start of the meeting, we will not have long preambles for questions. Please put your question.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. We request a councillor move a notice of motion to include the small basketball half court as a variation of the current project. My question to council, not staff, are what elements of the recent consultation have been included or changed on the plan for the works that have been tendered? And question 2, how much open space contributions have been received by council from Tranmere developments and subdivisions over the past 11 years when the planning started for this project? Thank you, Mr Mayor. Thank you, councillors.
CEO.
Thank you, Mayor. Could I ask Mr Graham to answer the first question and Ms Murrell to answer the second question, please?
And I'm happy to provide leave for that to be answered because it is a matter on the agenda. It's strict reading of the meeting regulations, ordinarily that sort of question, because it does relate to a matter on the agenda, would not be allowed. In this situation, I am allowing it though. Thank you, Mr Graham.
Through you, Mr Mayor, engagement was undertaken with the local community on the Pindus Park design plans via an information and consultation period. It was made clear no major changes could be accommodated at this stage, otherwise the project will miss a budget cycle and potentially be delayed further. The engagement to inform residents of the design was worthwhile to update the local community. No changes were made to the design plans released for tender. The idea of a basketball play area is welcomed, but requires specific consultation with the local community after the tendered works are complete and the area is in use. This methodology was similarly implemented with Symonds Park, where after the park was open, an additional area of swings was included in the next budget cycle. Pindus Park has some site constraints. It is considered beneficial to the community for the construction of the park play space to commence in the short term, let the community use the space, and then be consulted on what improvements can be included in the coming budget cycles. It is also important that specific consultation on any second stage development occur, including a basketball play area, so that specific concerns such as noise can be properly considered and assessed.
Thank you, Mr Graham. Mrs Murrell, for the second part of Mr Beard's question, please.
Through you, Mayor. The figures I'll be providing are from our audited financial statements of 30th of June 22, our most recent ones. The cash funds received for Tranmere only area is $274,313. And it is also worth noting that in the 23-24 budget, with the top-up funding for Pindus Park, $90,000 of that money is coming from the Public Open Space Reserve.
Thank you, Mrs Murrell. And I'll just make the point as well, Mr Beard, that when that email came through, it actually had said to council, not staff, if you wish to place a question on notice, it needs to go through the correct channels, which is via the staff. But happy to, as I say, provide the answer in this situation.
Thank you, Mr Mayor, but it was sent to staff and also sent to councillors.
I'm not going to debate it with you, Mr Beard. Thank you. So are there any other questions from the gallery? Name and suburb, please.
Victor Marsh from Bill Reeve. Before I start, I've got two photos I would like to pass around the Alderman to look at, so they get an idea what I'm talking about.
Mr Marsh, just also mindful of what I said at the start of the meeting, I will not accept a long preamble. Please put please put your question. If it is too long, I will stop it right there. Okay.
At a Clarence City Council meeting on the 25th of the 7th, 22, my wife Joanne Marsh asked a question without notice about the 15 DDA non-compliant curbs on Berry Bluff. These curbs pose a safety risk, in particular to people in wheelchairs, people with disabilities, the elderly and parents with large prams. My question is, can the council give an update on what progress has been made to rectify this issue?
Thank you, Mr Marsh. CEO.
Thank you. I think we'll need to take that one on notice. Thanks, Mr Marsh.
Are there any other questions from the gallery? There being none, we now move on to deputations by members of the public, and I understand that there are a number of deputations this evening. CEO.
Thank you, Mayor. We have 4 deputations tonight. The first is from Ms Claire Hester in relation to the development application for 30 Pittwater Road.
Or 300 Pittwater Road. Good evening,
300.
Ms Hester. And,
good evening.
And hello to Mr Gorgon as well. So.
Mr Mayor, Deputy Mayor, councillors. My name's Claire Hester. I'm a Principal Planner at ERA Planning and Environment and the Manager of the Planning Arm. Matthew Goggins here is the proponent and our client. I will talk to, very briefly, the planning matters, and Matthew will be available for sort of operational questions, and we'll talk to some of the concerns that have been raised through the public exhibition period. So just a couple of key points that I wanted to highlight to you all. So the golf course has already been approved. This application is for the clubhouse and associated facilities only. The clubhouse is not a sensitive use, and so it doesn't trigger any considerations around land use conflict. And the application triggers only 2 discretions, one of them associated with the that there's no provision of motorcycle parking, and the other one to do with the increase in traffic at junctions. That's been supported by Howard Fisher, a traffic engineer that was associated with the application, and also by Council's engineers. And lastly, I would just like to add that we are supportive of all the conditions on the permit, so we have no concerns with any of the conditions that were put forward by council staff. Thanks for your time.
Thank you, Ms Hester. Thank you very much. CEO.
Thank you, Mayor. Our second deputation tonight is from Mr Matthew Goggin in relation to the same development application.
Mr Mayor, councillors, my name is Matthew Goggin. I'm the proponent for the associated facilities in the clubhouse. I think what I really wanted to talk to tonight was the fact that this is a public golf course and the facility is a public facility. And the goal of the entire development has been to increase public access to the area, increase public amenities to the area, increase recreational opportunities for the area, and return the area to native and the native grasses and not the sort of environmental disaster zone it is at the moment with the introduced species. The design of the actual building is also trying to be along those lines as well. So when you think of a traditional clubhouse at a golf course, they can be very uninviting. They can be a rabbit warren of rooms. And I mean, I grew up going to all these private golf clubs my whole life, and even now, if I'm not a member of a particular club and I walk in there, I don't feel very comfortable. This is a public amenity. This is for everybody. It's not just for golfers. We want to have horse riders, dog walkers, bike riders, everyone come down and use the area and have this building as a place. I know there isn't officially going to be a day use area. I know we have a few there, but we feel as the proponent that we are a de facto day use area for the local community and the people of Clarence. It's also been designed very specifically and moved away from our neighbour, the sand mining activity. We're very sensitive to what they're trying to do, and we don't feel like we provide any conflict. We've had meetings with them, I've had discussions, emails, I gave them the site plan, I gave them plenty of opportunity to comment. We've designed the building with no windows facing north, which would be unusual for Tasmania because that's sort of where you get the winter sun. So we feel like not only is the design for not to be a private club, it's to be communal, but it's also very sensitive to our neighbours and to not impinge on the social licence they have for sand mining. We feel like both areas can be, or both activities can work cohesively together. And the third thing I'll say is that in the UK they have a thing called right to roam, and that means that on any public land or even private land, people should have the ability to walk through that. And being a lover of Scottish golf, I take that to heart, and I have that same feeling around our development. We want to have a right to roam where everyone's able to move through it, not even a right, but we encourage it. We want as many people down there as possible, so there'll be trails and all sorts of things for the public to come down and enjoy. Thank you for the time, and thanks again.
Thank you, Mr Goggin. CEO.
Thank you, Mayor. Our third deputation tonight is from Ms Stephanie Hofdo in relation to the development application for 24 Richmond Valley Road.
Thank you. Stephanie Hofdo, Richmond. I wanted to talk to you tonight about the Christmas Tree Farm planning application. I'm going to speak tonight in relation to the public representation about the traffic and access on Walworth Road to the business site. Taking this concern into consideration, I'll be initiating an online ticketing requirement for customers to select a tree. This will limit the number of vehicles entering Walworth Road during set times during the day. The ticketing example would be as follows: 30 tickets released 10 to 12 p.m, another 30 released 1 to 4 p.m. The business will be open on 4 weekends a year, starting in the last weekend in November, and only a limited number of trees will be available each year. Advertising, signage and website information will promote that parking is on site and it is a ticketed event only. Gates to the site will be open at 9 a.m. each business day, so there's no queuing in Walworth Road before the opening time of 10 a.m. I've allocated 40 parking spaces on site, and there's additional parking for cars with trailers and space for overflow parking if needed. This initiative should overcome concerns re traffic and access to the site.
Thank you, Ms. Hofto. Thank you very much. CEO.
Thank you, Mayor. Our final deputation tonight is from Mr Sam Morse in respect to the development application for 981 Cambridge Road.
Name and suburb, please. Mr Morse.
Sam Morse, Kingston. Good evening. Just wanting to talk about 981 Cambridge. It's obviously up for refusal, or has been refused. And until last Friday, we'd only understood that it was about density, not some other matters. But re-density, on our calculations, the proposed 9 dwellings are only 4 square metres short per dwelling of the permitted density of 8 dwellings on this site. As you're aware, the planning scheme provides a discretion to approve 9 dwellings if the proposal will achieve a significant social or community benefit. In this case, the proposal for 4 of 9 dwellings to be operated by Senecare Evolved as a community housing provider would add valuable benefit to the lives of at least 4 householders that have been forced out of private housing. The mixed tenure of community and private housing in this development is consistent with best practice. We consider that this proposal will indeed provide a significant benefit that is important and of consequence, particularly when weighted against the small extent of the discretion sought. P1, clause 8.4.1 provides for higher density where either A or B are met. B, being provides significant social or community benefit because it's within 80 metres walking distance to the local business zone, school and bus stops. This could be a DA Council condition requirement that the strata title must have a minimum 4 units retained for social housing to address the high density matter. On the other issues raised during 7 RFIs, we believe we had addressed each point as Council had accepted our further info supplied at the time. In particular, the matter of setbacks and overshadowing diagrams meeting the shortest day of the year's sunlight requirements were met. In relation to disabled access, this point was only brought to our attention on Friday when we received Council refusal agenda, and if brought up during the RFI process, we would have addressed by amending plans to suit, or still can. In relation to the reps raised, we believe that those points had been met through the RFI process, and if not, could have been during the BA documentation stage once the DA had been issued, with conditions applied. Examples: traffic congestion and impacts on school crossovers via traffic reports, water pressure, upgrades via Tas Water at developers' cost, vegetation loss by replanting and approved landscape plans. And we believe on this basis that the DA should be approved and the Council should be supportive of affordable housing projects. But I do leave a question: what does the Council consider significant in relation to social housing? Thank you.
Thank you, Mr Morse. CEO, are there any other deputations this evening?
No, that's it.
Right, thank you. Council now intends to act as a planning authority under the Land Use Planning and Approvals Act of 1993. Moving on to item number 7.1. Councillor James, thank you. 7.1 is a development application for 300 Pittwater Road, 7 Mile Beach, a golf course, clubhouse, amenities building and maintenance shed. Is there a mover of the motion? Councillor Goyne, thank you. Seconded Councillor Kennedy. Councillor Goyne.
As per the officer's recommendations, I visited the site several months ago and was impressed by the scope of the works that is proposed and has already commenced, and also the sensitivity to the environment in the particular area. And I will admit that I was originally one of the first to sign a petition against the development, but I have since met with Mr Goggin and fully supportive and look forward to riding the trails once they are up and running down there. So, thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Goyne. Councillor Kennedy.
Thank you, Mr Mayor, and I think Councillor Goyne, the mover of the motion, has summed up any concerns that some people may have had with regards to the riding trails. Very comfortable with this. I mean, we've already approved the golf course and now we're moving to the next stage. For someone that's lived in the area for 30 years, actually didn't realise such a magnificent piece of land existed. It really did blow me away by actually visiting the site. I think it will be great for the area. I look forward to the next stage, and I encourage colleagues to do so.
Thank you, Councillor Kennedy. Any other colleagues wishing to make a contribution? Councillor Mulder.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I have no trouble with the development per se, but as late as this afternoon, and once again here we go, people only know what the council officer's report is 3 or 4 days before the meeting, and this often causes us the sort of confusion that we get when representatives don't know what's been made of their thing. My question particularly relates to the actual siting of the clubhouse. I'm aware of an agreement that between the developer and some others, or some correspondence at least, which talked about a commitment that it would be at least 350 metres from the edge of the lease. I see here today that it says that it's actually 150 metres from the lease, and there was another little issue. So my first question is that and it's for the matter of the public record, I guess, is through you, Mr Mayor, obviously to the planners, is an agreement reached sometime prior about the 350 metres, which is now 150 metres, is that actually a planning matter?
Thank you, Councillor Mulder. Ms Olsen, are you in a position to provide an answer?
Thank you. Through you, Mayor. The setbacks from the sand mine are in fact, as there's no application in front of us for the sand mine to go that far, the buffer is not required to be provided at this point.
Rather than a planning matter, but I needed that on the record. My other issue relates to the suggestion that the clubhouse has been moved 400 metres to the west. That doesn't seem to have been possible. Is that correct? The original proposal, and it's now 400 metres to the west.
Thank you, Ms Olsen. Are you in a position to address that question, please?
Through you, Mayor. That's what it states in the report. So that's.
The final point is that, and I'm in no position to actually deal with the documents that I have before me, but the other suggestion is that although it says that the clubhouse would be approximately 150 metres from the mining lease, apparently the plans show that it's something like 250 or 200 metres from the thing. So, once again, a clarification.
Ms Olsen, are you able to?
Thank you. Through you, Mayor. I believe that the 150 metres from the lease is what we've been provided with as the distance. So.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. And having said that, with those minor queries having been settled, I think this is the sort of this is a great development, and I also do it, and it's no really business of mine, but given the fact that some of the issues we've had with the Royal and some of the other guys, I just wonder what the capacity is for Clarence's golf course regimes.
Thank you, Councillor Mulder. Any other colleagues wishing to make a contribution? There being none, right of reply, Councillor Goyne. Thank you. I'll put the motion. That is that for approval. All those in favour? That's unanimous. Thank you very much. We can invite Councillor James back in, please. Moving now, colleagues, on to item 7.2, which is development application for 981 Cambridge Road, Cambridge. 9 multiple dwellings, 1 existing and 8 new. The recommendation is for refusal. I'll call for a mover of the motion, please, or the recommendation. Councillor James, thank you. Is there a seconder? Thank you, Councillor Darko. Councillor James.
Yeah, thank you, Mr Mayor. And again, the question does arise in relation to affordable housing and of what is in fact part of the community interest and in fact what is a significant component within that, which was made quite apparent by the previous speaker. The officer's recommendation does delve into the jury decision that was made in the tribunal, and that does, of course, refer to, amongst other things, the density in relation to this sort of development. And also in the officer's recommendation, it does refer, and I quote, "Proposal does not comply with clause 8.4.2 P3 as the visual impacts caused by the overall apparent scale, bulk and proportion to the proposal would cause unreasonable loss of amenity. Also, the proposal does not comply with 8.4.4 P1 as the multiple dwellings have been designed and sited so as to cause an unreasonable loss of amenity by overshadowing the private space of another dwelling on the same site." This is one of these awkward decisions that we have to make, and of course the representative who spoke to us earlier made the comment, and that was in fact as far as how this council will look at and basically cover these important points in relation to community and social and affordable housing. But at the same time, we have a planning scheme, and the planning scheme is quite clear, I believe, and that is not only with relation to the density and the jury matter which was raised in the tribunal, but also the fact of the matter is that it has been through the assessment process as part of the P1, P3 and 8.4.2, and that has been noted of the scale and size and proportions of the proposal which would cause unreasonable loss of amenity. The other matter that needs to be raised and discussed is in fact the question of what constitutes the community being a group of people living in one place should not, in the tribunal's view, be interpreted narrowly. In the context of the site and the nature of the proposal, the tribunal's view is that community would comprise at least a collection of people who live in Blackstone Heights and may well extend beyond that community. The word significant social or community benefit require at the completion of the development it provides an outcome which is good for the community or society that is important and of a consequence. The test requires an assessment of the development as a whole, determine whether that high threshold is met. The proposal has not demonstrated how a significant social or community benefit would be delivered by the proposal, and therefore the recommendation by the officers has been refused. I seek council support.
Thank you, Councillor James. Councillor Darko.
Mr Mayor, as per the officer's recommendations, I do want to note that I am strongly in support of affordable and social housing. However, that should also be of a high standard that actually provides for the same amenities that everyone else is used to having. And yeah, as per the recommendations here for refusal against the planning scheme, I don't think that's something that's been met in this case.
Thank you, Councillor Darko. Any other colleagues wishing to make a contribution? Councillor Mulder.
Mayor, I was, as foreshadowed on Friday, and I simply had a case of mind, I was not persuaded by the council's refusal of this and was proposing to move an amendment because the density was the big issue. And if you look at density, as Councillor James has advised us, there's part of the quote that the social benefit. And although you must be looked at a wider social benefit, that's the case here. Additional supply of social affordable housing in the current crisis is an extremely wide social benefit. It's not just to the local people, it's to the community as a whole. We're in a crisis. And the decision referred to, I disagree with the officer's statement that significant social or community benefit requires the development do more than simply increase housing supply. This statement is not supported by the quoted case, which made the ruling that required social housing benefit must be more than a marginal impact on house prices through the release of blocks. That is not the social benefit that's being argued tonight. The social benefit that's being argued tonight is not the price of houses, but that an increase of supply is necessary to meet a demand. In 2015, there was not such a huge demand. And the reduction in land prices was a social benefit. I would argue was a strange thing. The argument now is that we're desperately short of housing. The sooner we can get on with and move it, the better it would be. And that's why I think that this social benefit of this particular thing, which is only an exception to the density argument, we could have argued that there could have been a different result. Now, having said that, I also, having looked through the thing, and then, as we discovered tonight, that my concern with this now is that in the modern day and age, we should be building things. And the only killer to this particular proposal, and the only ground that I'm supporting the refusal, is the fact that the pedestrian pathway and the disability access is not up to scratch. But as we've heard tonight, with due respect to the developer, he said that could have been, had he known that was an issue, and he only discovered it on Thursday, as the rest of us did, that he would have been able to fix that. But be that as it may, we are where we are, and we can't sort of be on the run amending the applications. So I support the refusal. It is a bit reluctant because I don't think it's a good look, and I do think that sometimes, and this is a point I'll make time and time again, this is not a criticism of the officers. They are diligently doing their job within their frames. But it is up to us as a planning authority, when we come to the performance criteria, when we come to those subjective judgments, for us to form a different view. And many of these decisions have been arrived at, usually through the Supreme Court, mind you, but sometimes through the appeal process, because council or an applicant out there has chosen to challenge the particular view of the officers. So please don't read me as this being a criticism of the officer. We as a planning authority have a responsibility to assess the arguments on their merits. And that is what I was proposing to do here. It's what I also have done. But as I said, on the basis of that unfortunate slip up in terms of disability access, I'm in a position to appeal this. And I also might say that so many of these things could be fixed if we ended up with a mediation process, if we had a stop the clock mechanism that didn't grind us down to this thing. Now, the previous council approved a motion of mine to move into that space, but it was promptly rejected. So any frustrations you hear, anything you hear about the government busy saying, as they did on the weekend, oh, we're always looking to improve the process, and as soon as someone comes up with a suggestion, they bucket it. So here we are where we are.
Councillor Kennedy and then Councillor Warren.
Thank you, Mr Mayor, and I'd like to thank the mover of the motion for explaining that so succinctly for us all. And we are where we are, and I think there's a number of us around the table that would love to bring this stock on because we need it. And I do think, and taking on Councillor Mulder's point, there may well, it doesn't seem to be that far away from being able to get a resolution, and I'm just hoping that at some point in time there can be some sort of mediation that can help the proponent, and I thank you for your deputation tonight.
Thank you, Councillor Kennedy. Councillor Warren.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Yes, we do need more social housing in Clarence and everywhere. I thank Councillor Darko for her comments about social housing shouldn't be seen as second best. It should be of a high quality, and it's important that we do that. The blocks are very, very small in this, and they don't meet the standard that we require of everybody else. But we've talked about density. One thing we haven't talked about is that for it to have any sort of social licence, then we need a firm commitment to operate this as social housing. We have an expression of interest, but not a firm commitment, and I believe that was conveyed to the developers. The other thing, there are a number of issues which perhaps can be met, so we're quite close, and it could be that those things can be rectified, but it did make me recall that last week Councillor Hume and I attended the Disability Access and Inclusion meeting, where we talked about the Access and Inclusion Toolkit that is available to all developers, private and public, so that their developments can meet access requirements at the beginning rather than having to be retrofitted. Universal access for all, we shouldn't be having to fix these things afterwards. They should be just a matter of course that those things go in. So it's not quite there. I encourage the developer to keep working and rectify those issues.
Thank you, Councillor Warren. Councillor Hume.
Thank you, Mayor. When we're sitting as a planning authority, we do need to apply the planning scheme. And I understand that Councillor Mulder has a disagreement in terms of the way that the planning scheme has been interpreted. We don't have to always accept exactly what the officers recommend, but we do have to recognise that they are the experts, and we do have to make sure that if we are going to disagree with them, that we go through those disagreements very, very carefully and discuss them with the experts to make sure that our reasoning is sound in terms of a planning reason. To disagree with the officers is one thing, but to disagree with the tribunal is another entirely. What we need to recognise is that the tribunal, and the officers in this case referred to 2 tribunal decisions in determining that this development doesn't have a significant social and community benefit. And the reason why we need to follow the guidance of the tribunal is because it's actually those tribunal decisions and court decisions, if it goes that far, that give definition to the planning scheme. There is no definition of a significant social and community benefit in the scheme, but the tribunal, through its rulings, has given those definitions. And the reason why those definitions are not so much necessarily binding on us, but at least...
Councillor Hume, there's a point of order from Councillor Mulder. Point of order, please.
Point of order is I think I'm being misrepresented and I'd like an opportunity to correct the record.
Thank you, Councillor Mulder. Please take your seat. Councillor Hume, just to be clear here, we're not adversely reflecting on Councillor Mulder's contribution. I understand you're talking to the report and information for you. Is that correct?
Yes.
Thank you. There's no point of order, Councillor Mulder.
Sorry,
Thank you.
by explanation, Mr Mayor.
Their personal explanation, please make it quick.
I'm being misrepresented in the fact that I'm being accused of not following the tribunal's decision, whereas in fact I was pointing out that the tribunal's discussion of social benefit was based on an old decision. I was not contradicting the decision, I was qualifying it.
Thank you for that clarification. Councillor Hume, does that...
All right, well, thank you for that clarification, Councillor Mulder. But I believe that the reasoning of the officers is very sound in terms of referring to these tribunal decisions and then also applying that to this decision. And I do agree with their reasoning. And in saying that, there's a part of the report I want to refer to here, because we need to understand that for this particular clause to be put in, referring to social and community housing and then applying different standards should it meet that test, would be redundant if the argument could be that, well, this provides additional supply, multiple housing dwellings provide additional supply. So, for example, and the officers made this point in the report, if the assessment was undertaken using this logic, then council could approve any multiple dwelling density proposal, regardless of social or community benefit, simply based on the number of dwellings proposed. Now, in his representations, Mr Morse did refer to how close the density was to the acceptable solution, and I just need to also make the point that the Henry Design decision in the tribunal said that in interpreting the performance criteria, the acceptable solution is not actually to be seen as a benchmark. It is, once the acceptable solution is not met, it is actually disregarded. So the proximity of any standard to an acceptable solution is not a relevant consideration in determining the performance criteria. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hume. Councillor Chong.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I won't reiterate things that my colleagues have said, but I guess for me, whether we're talking about density or we're talking about the overshadowing or we're talking about disability access and pedestrian access, At the end of the day, we can't decide that we could tweak this to make it fit what would be an appropriate application. We can only assess what's here, and what's here doesn't fit, however much it may be possible to make it fit at some point in the future. So for me, as for many of my colleagues, I will be supporting this refusal, even though, as many have said, we would desperately love to have more social housing in our municipality.
Thank you, Councillor Chong. Councillor Goyne.
I just wanted to say that Councillor Mulder said far more eloquently exactly what I was planning on saying, and everyone else has reiterated. And I think 4 houses is significant, especially if you are somebody who cannot afford accommodations. However, yes, as has been mentioned, we are acting as a planning authority, so I will have to follow the recommendations.
Thank you, Councillor Goyne. Deputy Mayor, yes, then it's everyone.
Thank you. And I won't, I'll try not to cover areas that have already been covered very eloquently, as Councillor Goyne just indicated. This is one of those frustrating ones that we would love to have been able to be in a position to stand here this evening and support wholeheartedly. We do need more housing, no doubt about it. I'm sure all communities are crying out for more housing. We'd love to be supporting all of those applications where we can. As Councillor Chong has just indicated, there isn't one particular issue alone that causes a difficulty with any attempt to accept this proposal. Unfortunately, there are multiple issues where non-compliance arises, and I would have thought, if any councillor, as usual, had thought that there was significant capacity to mount a argument for an alternate motion that would have the strength to survive a challenge, they would have done so. Unfortunately, none of us have felt that we've had the capacity to do that, even as much as we would have liked to, and it was considered at one point, just didn't feel that we had the legs to do that. So that's all very unfortunate. I would also like to, as Councillor Kennedy did, thank the proponents for the contact that was made throughout the process, and I really appreciated that. I am interested in how that works, the feedback that there was some element of not understanding, in fact, what all the non-compliance was going to look like is a little bit of a concern that I think will require some discussion outside of the chamber tonight. But like colleagues, I unfortunately will also have to support the Office of Recommendation, but hopefully we see something come back to us in the not too distant future.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Councillor James, right of reply, please.
Thank you. I seek council support.
Thank you. So item 7.2, it's a development application for 981 Cambridge Road, Cambridge. It's for refusal. All those in favour? That's unanimous. Thank you, colleagues. Moving now on to item 7.3, which is development application for 24 Richmond Valley Road, Richmond, change of use to resource development at Christmas Tree Farm. I'll call for a mover, please. Thank you, Councillor Goyne. Seconded, Councillor Mulder. Thank you, Councillor Goyne.
I just wanted to say that, everybody loves Christmas, so who wouldn't want a Christmas tree farm at the end of their street? As some of you are aware, I do live part-time in Richmond Valley Road, so I don't have any concerns over the use of the land, the change of the use for resource development, and I look forward to coming Christmas tree hunting, and also appreciate the deputations made as well to allay some of the concerns about the access and the amount of traffic. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Goyne. Councillor Mulder.
Ho, 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 Mr Mayor. I'm looking forward to actually being able to get a real Christmas tree, one with a proper shape and not just a branch that hangs out over the side and is actually flat and only looks in one direction. I think this is a wonderful idea. The only person who's probably likely to disagree with it, and she hasn't been elected to council, is my wife, who hates cleaning up the pine needles.
Thank you, Councillor Mulder. Any other colleagues?
Planning matters, by the way, Mr.
Councillor Chong, thank you.
Just very briefly, Mr Mayor, I have had a number of people talk to me about this, issues with traffic, issues with bushfire, and I'm grateful for the deputation talking about how they're going to manage the traffic, because that will obviously allay some of those issues. I do think bushfire is something that needs to be thought about and communicated to the local residents, because there are a number who are concerned about access out in the event of a fire, but that's probably something for communications later.
Thank you, Councillor Chong. Any other colleagues wishing to make a contribution? Being none, Councillor Goyne, right of reply.
Nothing really to say except for the fact that you used to be able to get Christmas trees from Mortimer Bay until council started cutting them down a few weeks before Christmas. So that might be a hot tip for you, Councillor Mulder.
Well,
Thank
all
you.
right. Thank you for that, Councillor Goyne. Put this to the vote now. It's for approved change of use to resource development Christmas tree farm. All those in favour? That's unanimous. Thank you, colleagues. Moving now, I advise now the Council concludes its deliberations as a planning authority under the Land Use Planning and Approvals Act of 1993. Moving now on to item number 8. There are no determination of petitions. There's no asset management or financial management issues. Moving on to 8.4, governance. 8.4.1, Lauderdale Yacht Club lease of public land extension of leased area. And there's a recommendation before us. I'll call for a mover. Thank you, Councillor Kennedy. Seconded, Councillor Chong. Councillor Kennedy.
No, thank you, Mr Mayor. I'm happy with the recommendation as discussed at Friday's briefing.
Thank you, Councillor Chong.
As per the officer's recommendation.
Thank you very much. Any other colleagues wishing to make a contribution? Councillor James.
Only a question, Mr Mayor, and that is that hopefully yourself or the CEO can advise. The land on which the Lauderdale Yacht Club building stands, is that land owned by council, or is it owned by the yacht club, or is it between the yacht club and a Crown lease, please?
Thank you, Councillor James. CEO, thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. The land is public land owned by council.
Councillor James.
Okay. So the building is owned by council. Is that the way it is then?
I'll put that. We'll just get that clarified.
Yes.
CEO.
I might defer to
Ms. Shea.
Ms. Shea on that.
Yeah.
The land is council land, is public land, but the buildings are actually owned by the club.
So, follow up on that. Excuse my
Thank
ignorance.
you, Ms. Shea. Councillor James.
So the land is owned by council and the buildings are owned by the
Yacht Club.
The yacht club. So, at what stage is council able to determine as to whether that building still stands or is unfit for purpose or something like that? I'm just concerned that it seems to me that, in my experience, we've owned the buildings, we've owned the land, and there's been a lease, and if they have owned the buildings, then it's like Cambridge. The buildings will become council's property at some stage. So I just can't understand, Mr Mayor, how this sort of thing... I think the actual... gives notice of intention to dispose of the public land by lease to the Lauderdale Yacht Club. That public land by lease is the land on which the buildings stand, as I understand it. So why are we doing a lease on the public buildings when in fact the buildings are owned by the yacht club? I just can't understand. Sorry.
I think the CEO will clarify this, but I understand that the lease is actually for the land, not the buildings.
That's correct.
CEO.
Yeah, the lease is only related to the land. The buildings have always been owned by the yacht club, and they've been there for a number of decades now. So we effectively, through the lease, permit them to build on that land subject to having the appropriate permits and our consent to do so.
Finally, yes, I understand.
Thank you, CEO.
So the words in the motion part, in the recommendation part A, says council gives notice of its intention to dispose of public land by lease. So by the very nature of disposing of public land, that means that ad infinitum, it would mean that there wouldn't need to be a renewal at some stage of the lease by disposing of it. Look, again, clarification.
Chairman, we'll defer to the CEO with his lawyer's hat on. Thank you.
Thank you,
Mr Nelson.
Thank you, Mayor. The language that's used is reflective of the fact that when you lease land, you are providing the opportunity for the lessee to have quiet enjoyment of that land for their purposes for a period of time. So we are in effect giving up our right to utilise that land and providing that to them for their benefit. So it's not a sale of the land, it is simply a disposal via lease for the term of that lease.
Councillor James, anything else you'd like to... All right, thank you very much. Councillor Goyne, did you want to know? Sorry, you were doing a Councillor Mulder move and I just assumed. I'm sorry. Anyone else wish to make a contribution on this item? There being none, Councillor Kennedy, right of reply. Thank you. I'll put the recommendation. All those in favour? That's unanimous. Thank you, colleagues. Moving now on to item 8.4.2, 7 Mile Beach Local Area Plan Request to consult. Oh, there's a recommendation before us. I'll call for a mover. Thank you, Councillor Kennedy. A seconder. Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Councillor Kennedy.
Nothing really, Mr Mayor, other than let's just get on with it.
Thank you, Councillor Kennedy. Deputy Mayor.
Likewise. Thank you.
It's short and sharp. Anyone else wish to make a contribution? Councillor Mulder, thank you.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Of course, we support this, the 7 Mile Beach Development Plan, and I also do is, although we may consult up and down Dale with the community, I think it's also important that we factor in issues such as climate change, the increasing severity of rainfall, and we've seen in the Northern Hemisphere just this week some of the things, particularly in Korea, that they're all telling us look forward to next year, in our summer. So, and these areas, we have roads where council can't even repair the potholes because the water table is still too high or is too high, and it takes and the roads are continually being dumped. And the answer is, as we've partially done in 7 Mile Beach, is to pump out solutions and detention ponds and those sorts of issues, those sorts of things. And I would certainly hope that we don't miss the opportunity during the consultation of developing a structure plan which deals with and I notice it in there, it is all our desire that due to E. coli and other sorts of contaminants with the septic tank system that exists there, how often when are we going to wake up to the fact that you don't pipe water in if you can't pipe wastewater out? So if you can pump out the, if it's our desire to pump out the sewerage, then surely it can't be too difficult to pump out stormwater at the same time, albeit in a different pipe. So I'm for this, but I would hate to think that we miss opportunities to future-proof our stormwater systems.
Thank you, Councillor Mulder. Any other colleagues wish to make a contribution? Councillor James, thank you.
Yes, thank you, Mr Mayor, and it's interesting that we come this far from March 2022 when Niche Studio was appointed to produce the 7 Mile Beach Local Area Plan. It just seems as though that it's sort of moved around the edges. It has moved in such a way that the consultation showed the community desire to retain a relaxed beachside village character, a need for an iconic building with a grocer and a cafe for locals and visitors, upgraded public amenities, enhanced beach access, preservation of natural character and improved pedestrian movement and amenity on public streets. There was strong support for sewer upgrades, and it seems as though that and stormwater management in depth, I use the word in depth investigation of stormwater management, are outside the basic scope of what Niche were appointed to do. So it will be interesting to for the feedback on this, because it may be that a number of issues will be raised, but that would have to be then considered by council as to whether or not it goes the full hog or full distance in relation to addressing stormwater inundation and the very nature of whether we're going to, or whether TasWater would do what we did in this place back in prior to TasWater taking over sewerage, and of course the very worthwhile project we did in Lauderdale of that sewer system that was implemented for that very area. So again, I'm hopeful that one of the recommendations that will come out of this will look at the big picture and not just look at beautification of 7 Mile Beach and the enhancement of the trees and the basic sort of enhanced beach access and preservation of natural character and so on. I think hopefully it may come out in the wash that there be very strong representations on how we're going to handle stormwater and inundation, and also as to whether TasWater has the necessary timeline that may be a suggestion or recommendation from the public when they put forward their concerns. So it's a step in the right direction. I know that Nish, when they spoke with us at the workshop, they said it was sort of the big picture of what I've just really referred to is outside their brief, and at this stage it's more of a cosmetic approach, in my opinion, to what can happen or what should happen in relation to 7 Mile Beach. So, having said that, let's be hopeful, Mr Mayor, that there may be some really strong representations that come back or from the consultation process, and that council in conjunction with TasWater can take the next step to really address some of the real concerns in the 7 Mile Beach area. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor James. Any other colleagues wish to make a contribution? Being none, Councillor Kennedy, right of reply, please.
I'd just like to thank Councillor James for his comments in particular, and being such a champion of the area for such a long time. And I think I can pretty much assure you that those questions will be asked by the residents there, because those issues highlighted are front of mind. So thank you. I seek colleague support.
Thank you, Councillor Kennedy. I'll now put the motion. All those in favour? And that's unanimous. Thank you very much. Moving now on to 8.4.3, which is a request to participate in significant professional development training. The recommendation before us is that Council approves Councillor Hunter's request to attend an Australian Institute of Company Directors course in September 2023 in accordance with the Council allowances and expenses policy of 2023. Is there a mover? Thank you, Councillor Chong. Is there a seconder? Councillor Kennedy, thank you. Councillor Chong.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. As a fellow of the Institute of Company Directors myself, I think this is a really worthwhile course and brings a great deal of professionalism to both we can bring to this chamber and also to the other bodies that we work on as representatives of council. I think it's very important, if somebody wishes to undertake the course, that we help facilitate it.
Thank
My
you,
support.
Thank you, Councillor Chong. Councillor Kennedy.
Yeah, I'd just like to say that if I had been on council and I did that course, it would have been a great saving, and I would have jumped at the opportunity to have been able to do it. And it can only add to anyone's personal development to undertake that course. We discussed it. I think colleagues have discussed this at length, and I support it.
Thank you. Any other colleagues wish to make a contribution? Councillor James.
Again, just a question to you, Mr Mayor, and how you made this turn to... it's my understanding that there was only 12,500 approved for professional development, and that's for 1 year. And then in the ongoing years, there would be another allocation at the budget time, as part of the budget process. So my question through you is that the 12,500 is the full amount that's applicable to professional development for the financial year 23-24. That's my question first. Thanks.
Thank you for the question, Councillor James. And as I addressed this in response to you on Friday's briefing, that is the policy. That's what it does allow for.
Thanks.
If there was a situation where another colleague wished to also access a similar course, there is an option, and it is available to them to come into this council, to come to this chamber with a motion seeking additional funds. For the purposes of the policy and purposes of the budget, it is capped out at $12,500 per annum. You'll note that the cost here will be just under $9,500. It does leave $3,000 that's still available. But it's also, as I understand it, my discussions with Councillor Hunter, she's also engaged with colleagues as well. This is, of course, in addition to the $6,500 allocation that we all have over the 4-year term as well. Like Councillor Chong, I too am a fellow of the Institute, did the course a number of years ago. I see the benefit of it. Obviously, Councillor Kennedy's done it, but I understand that other colleagues have done AICD courses as well. So I hope that answers the question, Councillor James.
Yes, look, thank you. And look, I think it's a great thing that my colleagues, obviously attend these sort of professional development courses. It's just that there's only 3,000 left out of a bit over 3,000. And for someone else or another member to put forward a request to do this Australian Institute of Company Directors course, then the amount that's going to cost is of the vicinity of 9,000, as you've just mentioned, Mr Mayor. It doesn't leave anybody else in this financial year to do that course, and I would have thought that if we had apportionment of our allowance to attend training, which is $6,500, that part of that could have been used towards this particular course, and therefore it would have left an opportunity, would have been an opportunity for someone else if they wanted, or he or she, to do that course. And that's the only thing I'm just concerned about. It's just all of the allowance on professional development is going to one person when in fact there may be others that might do the course, and you've suggested that, and others have done it, that there's not enough money to do the course unless you try to have X amount of dollars brought out of a vote somewhere to top it up if another member wanted to do the course during this budget year. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor James. Any other colleagues wishing to make a contribution? Councillor Hume, thank you.
I just want to respond in terms of the concerns that Councillor James raised, that when we discussed this at a workshop, I sort of raised similar questions and concerns, but as you pointed out at that time, Mr Mayor, this is the sort of thing that would probably come up on a fairly occasional basis. I mean, as you've noted, there are 3 colleagues around the table who have already completed the AICD course. Councillors serve a 4-year term. Once that 4-year term's over, a number do get re-elected. So there are a number of opportunities, plus the opportunity to increase the budget should we need that additional allocation for 2 people to complete the course within the 1 year. And I do agree that it's a very, very valuable course. But I'm fairly comfortable with the approach that's being taken. It's really a matter for the council if they believe that it's appropriate for Councillor Hunter to complete that course and for the majority of the allocation to be spent on her, then it's open to us to approve that. Like I said, I can't see this coming up very, very regularly, so I'm very comfortable with it.
Thank you, Councillor Hume. Any other colleagues? There being none, Councillor Chong will have a reply. Thank you very much. I'll put the motion, the recommendation. All those in favour? Against? So you're abstaining, Councillor James?
Thanks, Mr.
Okay, thank you. Moving now on to item 8.4.4, which is the draft Tasmanian Planning Policy submission to the Tasmanian Planning Commission. I'll call for a mover of the motion, please. Thank you, Councillor James. Is there a seconder? Thank you, Councillor Chong. Councillor James.
Yes, look, we had the acting city planner and the statutory planner at one of our workshops recently, and both those senior members of staff went through this particular process and identified, Mr Mayor, as you probably appreciate, and most of us around the table as well, that there are a number of matters that need to be fine-tuned in relation to planning principles, and this is the right time in which to do it. As to whether or not we reach that outcome that we really desire to have, as far as councils being able to sort of have the authority to be able to take it to the next step, again, that's going to be a real change in relation to the planning policies and also the statewide planning scheme. So at this stage, I think what the staff have done is tremendous. They've gone ahead, they've basically crossed the T's and dotted the I's, and they've gone into great depth and even circulated a draft copy of the planning principles. So you really need a lot of time and effort for that. But that was explained on the night, and I think this is a great move forward, and I seek council support. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor James. Councillor Chong.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Can I add my thanks to the staff for the, no doubt, very comprehensive work that they've done on this. I certainly wouldn't have envied you doing that job.
Thank you, Councillor Chong. Any other contributions? Councillor Mulder, thank you.
Yes, we can but comment on the policies as we've done, and it's not that I don't endorse the letters and all the rest of it, but this is really cart before the horse stuff. I mean, even if you have a look at the schematic on page 256, it talks about the Resource Management Planning System. It talks about the Land Use Planning and Approvals Act. The next step after that is the objectives of the Land Use Planning and Approvals Act. And then we get the Tasmanian planning policies. And then we get, after that, the Tasmanian planning scheme. Yet we've got the Tasmanian planning scheme, and now we're going backwards and looking about the policies that are going to be applied. And as so often we have the debates around here, if we're in doubt about what the planning scheme means or says, or as we debate here just about everything, the first step is not to go and have a look back. The thing is, when you've got a statewide planning scheme, you should be looking at what the policies are, what the objectives of the scheme are, what the policies that underlie the scheme, why we have the scheme. So here we have, for the last few years, been running around interpreting a planning scheme without policies to refer to as to what it's trying to achieve. And it really is the sort of thing that happens when you, with a rush of blood to the head, decide you're going to have a single statewide planning scheme, and you push that thing through, and then you go through the torturous process we've had of the local provision schedules over all that time and all the effort and energy that went into that, and now we end up with a set of policies which are our guidance for how we do the work that we've been doing for the last few years. It's just right around back the other way. Now we have the job trying to work out whether the planning scheme meets these policy objectives. Come on, guys, let's get this sorted out. Let's do it properly if you're going to do it, or, which is what I suspect is really happening here, we're going to have a statewide planning scheme, we're going to create a developers picnic, and lo and behold, we'll put up some policies to justify our positions down the track after the horse has bolted. So, I mean, of course I agree with this. I just question what sort of governance regime we have when we develop. I mean, the way it goes is you have a vision, you have some policies, some guiding principles, if you like, about what it is, and then you develop a plan, and then you execute that plan. Here we are, as I said, all around the wrong way, but who cares? I mean, here we've got a statewide planning scheme. That's all that really matters. Let's just put some icing around the cake down the track sometime, as we're doing tonight. But in the end, we've got our statewide planning scheme, and it just wonders me sometimes, if we've got a single statewide planning scheme, why do we need 29 planning authorities to interpret it?
Councillor Mulder, anyone else wish to make a contribution? Councillor James, right of reply, please. Thank you. I'll put the motion. All those in favour? That's unanimous. Thank you very much. Moving now on to item number 9, motions on notice. And as colleagues will be aware, the following two motions, 9.1 saying the name of Councillor Mulder and 9.2 saying the name of Councillor Warren, have been withdrawn from the agenda. The following urgent matter has been added to the agenda. That's the review of the 42-day development application timeframe. Call for a mover. Deputy Mayor, thank you. Is there a seconder? Thank you, Councillor Goyne. Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Mr Mayor, and I thank colleagues for their interest and their earlier support for including this item in the agenda this evening. All colleagues would, of course, be aware of the very recent issue around the Kira Road proposal. However, this motion is undoubtedly a broader issue with wider principal considerations here. More specifically, the motion that I've brought here today is about noting the concerns that many of us have relating to the exercise of the 42-day rule and how this affects, and in my view too harshly affects, the capacity for councillors and community members to have a voice as part of the planning process. Now, I'm aware that this is not new. I'm aware that this has been a matter of contention for many years, and not just at our council, I'm sure, across the state undoubtedly. But I feel that Clarence Council has shown that we've got a willingness and an interest to take matters to the Local Government Association, as we have recently done in relation to the short stay accommodation issue, and the fact that we successfully moved a motion here. That's now been accepted by Legat to set up a review with a view to formulating a sector-wide response. I think that's something that we need to strive for in relation to this. It's very difficult for an individual council to bat on some of these matters alone. So. I think that's the way that we will try and see change, that we will try and successfully lobby for something to shift in relation to these matters that have been going on, in my view, for too long. And it also feeds into what I know other colleagues have a concern about, which relates to the tools that we have available to us when we're looking at development applications. And I think it's the right time to develop a position to put forward to Legat so that we can see a sector-wide support base for a position of change that can be then taken to the state government. Because the current statutory timeframe in Tasmania is the shortest in the nation. And, of course, the right for extension rests entirely with the applicant. And for me, that doesn't strike the right balance of fairness in the planning process and denies the rights of all other parties at that point. So what I'm really trying to do here, obviously I'm flagging an issue. The community understands the issue more and more as you speak to people, as they might become affected about it, when you explain the situation and where our hands are tied and what happens with the delegation. People feel this is very wrong out there. They feel that their elected members being unable to speak on their behalf is something that shouldn't be allowed to occur in these particular circumstances. So I think now's the time to start to continue to raise this matter at a different level, because this is not going to go away. It's going to be an issue that we continue to see from time to time, and that will continue to impact, in my view, unfairly. So I appreciate the interest of colleagues, those colleagues who joined with me on the weekend. Thank you for your interest and coming along to meeting with those particular residents that wanted to have their voice heard. And I seek the support of my colleagues. Of course, this is about, convening a workshop for us. I look forward to working with colleagues to arrive at a position that we can then hopefully bring back to this place and take to the Local Government Association. So I seek colleague support.
Thank you. Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Councillor Goyne.
As Councillor Ritchie has eloquently put, this is an important motion, I believe, to allow us as elected members to actually speak for the people that have elected us. And I just wanted to reiterate the CEO's comment that the council officers would prefer development applications with 2 or more deputation to be referred to elected members for debate and determination in all circumstances, and that the 42-day rule as it stands lacks nuance and is a blunt legislative tool. And I would have to deeply agree with that, and I seek colleague support.
Thank you, Councillor Goyne. Councillor Warren.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I absolutely agree with a large chunk of this. I don't necessarily agree that it's urgent because the LGAT meeting isn't till November, and that's the first opportunity we have to seek support from other councils. I would have been more comfortable with this coming to the next meeting and having a chance to thrash out some of the finer detail. So while I have no problem supporting A and most of C, I have some problems with Part B. Part C requires the CEO to urgently convene a council workshop. Again, we've got a number of months before the deadline for submitting motions. I would rather get this right than get it done fast. And the second part, I'm not sure whether that's true. I think it's suggesting that some councillors would have gone against their obligation to sit as a planning authority and accept the advice and whether something complies or not. This was a difficult one. A number of us are really unhappy with it and certainly would have liked to have voted against it, but we may not have had that ability under the planning authority. So I don't really feel that B is important to the motion. I think that A and C are, let's have a workshop, let's discuss ways that the 42-day rule could be made more applicable. For a start, as it says in the explanatory notes, it is the shortest time frame anywhere in the country. So is it possible to extend it? Is it possible to have it both parties, any representatives have a say in whether an extension is granted, all those sorts of things. So I look forward to discussing that at a workshop, coming up with a really solid motion that is likely to get support of all our other council colleagues around the state. Yeah, I'm not sure whether I can support this with Part B in it. So I'll continue to listen to the debate.
Thank you, Councillor Warren. And just on a point of clarification, my understanding, correct me if I'm wrong here, sir, but the motions for LGAT need to be in by the end of next month, the end of August. So that's sort of part of the reason why. And there'll be, I think there's one more council meeting, so you're right, it could come back to the next council meeting. Is it your desire that this be taken ad seriatim, A, B and C taken separately?
That would be useful, thank you.
Okay, I'm happy to do that. Any other colleagues wishing to make a contribution? Councillor James.
Yes. Thank you, Mr Mayor, and I think it's really important that the urgency motion came forward because otherwise we wouldn't have this debate, and it's really polarised the community on this one. It really has, because of the nature of how it went through a process, and then because the officers sought an extension of time and it wasn't granted. And there is the perception that out there in the community now, developers know the process, and there will be more of these sort of applications coming forward and, sort of hitting the deadline and also running short of the council meeting on which the 42-day timeline expires. So, having said that, it's now on the public record that this motion is out in the public arena, and that the Part A was approved by officers' delegation, because other than that, a small group of the community at at Roaches Beach may have been of the view that something else happened, but by the very nature of having it in the public arena, Mr Mayor, and notes that Courier Road Roaches Beach development was approved by officers' delegation is extremely important. And even though I voted against the motion because I thought, you know, really to have that one come forward, but I had a moment of consideration in relation to this and thought, yes, let's get it out in the open, let's have this debate, and we have highlighted Courier Road here. You know, it's really important that we have that message put across. The other thing is that I'd like to thank the planner Imogen Rowe, which gave us a timeline in relation to this, because even though the 42 days, and that's a matter that's been covered in Part C, and also the Part A obviously recognises the statutory time frame of 42-day rule, the question here arises as to whether or not this application was able to be handled within 42 days. Now, the application was made valid on the 30th of May, once the fees were paid. A request for further information was made on the 8th of June. So there's 8 days between the date of when the fees were paid and when a request was put out. The developers responded promptly on the next day, the 9th of June. That's fast to have that information back to us. What happened next was the application was advertised on the 14th of June and the 28th of June, and the application's statutory time frame was to expire on the 12th of July. There was a week between the 9th of June and the 14th of June and the 28th of June when that advertising period occurred. So already you're running out of time by the end of the second run on the application, advertising I should say, and therefore you're running out of time at that stage. It seems to me that there is an issue about the advertising and meeting that at 42 days within the advertising time. The other thing is that, and I'm not sure, I'll seek guidance from you, Mr Mayor, in relation to that, but if there is that opportunity that this is going to be dragged out and there's going to be another opportunity where developers are going to start to say, well, we can get this under officers' delegation. Therefore, is it possible to have, and it may mean it taking a little bit of an effort, to have a special meeting to be able to handle this within that time frame of 42 days? Now, that's the question I'm asking, and it may be answered at perhaps at the workshop. But at this stage, I think there is a bit of a gap in there between the time that information has been received by the proponent and the time it actually goes out to advertising. I think there's a bit of a lag in there, and I think that could be addressed. So, look, I will support the motion. I think it's highlighted Courier Road, and I didn't go to the meeting on Saturday because I had a day off. So that wasn't for that reason. So, look, I wanted to assure people of that. So, and I think Part B says recognise that companies are of the view. Well, we are. There are people, colleagues in this place who recognise this and are quite angry by the very nature. And also, let's have a workshop and discuss. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor James, and you, as always, make some wonderful suggestions. I might ask the CEO to specifically address at least one of those suggestions that you made. Thank you, CEO.
Thank you. I just wanted to make it clear that that initial period of a number of days before advertising is actually used by the officers to conduct their assessment of the DA. That's the process that then informs whether we need to request any further information, which is obviously what happened, and that needs to occur before advertising can occur, so that people responding and seeking further information before they make a submission actually have all of the same information that the officers have in their process. So it's really important, particularly with a lot of these DAs where there's some complexity to them, and you're very familiar with the process that we need to go through. that does take a number of days, and that's what that initial period looks like. So sometimes it might be a little bit shorter, sometimes it might not be, but 5 to 8 days is about normal.
Thank you, CEO. Councillor Kennedy.
Thank you, Mr Mayor, and thank you to colleagues for your contributions so far. And I think this is a really, really important conversation to be having. And, you know, it's offering at least some explanation to the people of Kira Road. Like a number of people, were contacted a couple of weeks ago and gave them very comfortable assurance that it would come to us. My first question was, is there more than one representation? Oh yes, there's a whole cul-de-sac. And so, you know, we feel very remiss, and yet there is nothing we could do about it, nor could the officers. And that's why, as Councillor Goyne pointed out, the CEO's explanation on the back really tells the story. And look, you know, I accept B, look, A and C, 100%, it doesn't really bother me too much because, again, everything comes to us and we should, you know, view it as it comes to us. But we're, you know, this is, as Councillor James has said, this is really important to get out in the public arena so people can actually understand what it is that we're dealing with. And I'm sure there's a number of us, all of us, that probably feel really bad that this has happened, but it's happened. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Kennedy. Councillor Mulder, thank you.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I'll start with B and just point out, I think you might be jumping at shadows here. This isn't prejudging anything. A decision's been made, reasons have been given. We as individual councillors have every right to debate, to question and reach an alternative view. There is nothing in B says that council would have supported the alternative recommendation. In fact, if you look at it, it says recognises that some councillors, and I can count at least 2, probably 3, that had the application been assessed by council sitting as a planning authority, there are, and I'm not going to go into the details, I don't have the time, as I would in debate, but there are some things about this particular application which are open to interpretations, whereas in the past we've found our hands tied by this, but there are things in the building code, there are some other particular issues with this location that would lead us to at least have the debate. And that's all this says. An alternative recommendation would most likely have been moved and debated. It doesn't say we would have, that the council as a whole would have agreed with it. As we often find, my interpretations of the planning scheme aren't always shared by my colleagues, but all this is saying, and this is one of the issues, and the staff themselves back this up, it was their preference that this matter come to council and to be debated. And that's why this is an important B. It's not fatal or anything else, but it's an important piece of context to this question of the 40-day rule. It's about our rights, about our capacities to stand up here and debate things. Now, on the 42 days rule, yes, it's the most ridiculous time frame, and I recall when this was being passed through the Parliament, and the then planning minister, the Honourable Peter Gutwin, was sat there, and I raised this simple issue, drawing on my experience because I've been on council when it was 3 months. And sometimes the difficulty in 3 months by the time the argy-bargy comes, and we've heard a fair bit of that tonight from developers, that the argy-bargy comes, that you need that sort of time. You need that sort of time to assess these things. And the delays in the thing are always with the tribunal, rarely with the councils who abide by their timelines. And his response to this suggestion was a shrug of the shoulders and a silly smirk, which indicated that's exactly what we're trying to do. That's exactly what we're trying to do. We're trying to dismember the planning authority so that it's development at all costs, irrespective of the thing, and let's just get on there, roughly fit the guidelines, and she'll be right. So, and I might note, it's the Planning and Approvals Act. It's not the Planning and Land Use Assessment Act. It's the Approvals Act. Guess what it's oriented towards? So the thing with the 42 days, and this we've seen an example of it tonight, it's not 42 days. You can game the system, as these people have done, I would argue. They have gamed the system and they are now giving us something like 23 days to assess, to advertise, to do the deal with the objectors, to get the feedback on the objections, and assess them all. And 23 days is just simply impossible. Now, we could fix that. We can fix it. We can live within the 42 days. We can do it without the delegation. It just means we have to have extra council meetings. We could always schedule, an extra council meeting where council sits solely as a planning authority. We could do that, and that would address that. But it still doesn't get to the fact is that even 42 days should be given the full is quite often not enough time to give this due diligence. I mean, the colleagues must be like me. You get the full report on Thursday, if you come in and get it, or if and then what happens is you go out there and you have a look at it, you read the report, and then as happened to me today and to a few of you today, the applicants look at the report or the objectors look at the report and they take issue with matters inside the report. But of course, they only do that on the weekend. We've had the agenda brief on Friday. So here we are. I mean, on the way here today, I'm handling a phone call with someone who's trying to explain to me some complexities about where he thinks the officers may have got it wrong. This stampeding, and that's what leads to bad decisions. So all I can say is that we can fix this, but even 42 days isn't really enough on complex matters. And maybe we could fix it. Maybe they could say, if they wanted to make it so that it's timely.
Thank you, Councillor Mulder. Councillor Hume.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Look, this is absolutely important issue. It's one that's been around for a while. I think colleagues may recall that I asked a question when a similar matter came up where a decision had been made under delegated authority, and I guess what my question at that time was getting at was what Councillor Mulder was talking about, the issue of can developers game the system by timing the handling of their applications in terms of perhaps when they provide responses to questions so that they can avoid it being coming to council. Now, even if that is difficult to do, we know that it can still happen. That if it happens to be timed in that way, they can refuse an extension of time. And it's curious to see that we seem now, and I'm thinking, this is a similar system that was in place when I was previously on council, but it seems like now we're getting so many more of these applications that are being dealt with under delegated authority because the applicant has refused an extension of time. Now, as a general principle, there are criteria that need to be applied to what decisions get made under delegated authority, what decisions get made by the planning officers, and what decisions come to us as a planning authority. And there's some sound criteria around that with number of representations, the fact that it's a discretionary application in that it breaches acceptable solutions, but we've got to consider it in terms of performance criteria. But the timing of the application should not be one of those considerations. That's the principle that I think we all absolutely agree with. In terms of this motion, I was a little bit uncomfortable supporting the procedural motion to bring it on for similar reasons to Councillor Warren. I do question the urgency of it. I mean, but because what the motion is calling for is quite benign, like as a general principle, I don't think urgency motions should be brought on unless they're genuinely urgent. But this in terms of what it's asking for, which is a workshop, is quite benign, and therefore I'm happy to support it. But I mean, I'm sure if we wanted a workshop, we could simply ask the CEO for one. If as he points out in his comments that he agrees that it's a significant issue, but on any issue, I'm sure if enough of us say that we consider it to be important, we can just ask for a workshop. So I don't know that the motion was necessary, except perhaps to bring the debate into this chamber and to have canvassing of the issues for the sake of the public. to have the confidence that we're addressing this matter and that we're taking it seriously. I guess it has a benefit in that sense. So happy to support the motion, and you know, I hope we can get some good recommendations out of that workshop in terms of what we as a council can do to address this in terms of our own procedures potentially, but also what we are going to push for in terms of the legislation. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hume. Councillor Darko, thank you.
Mr Mayor, yeah, it seems as though we're all furiously in agreement on this. Yeah, it's fundamentally undemocratic for representatives to not be able to have their views heard, potentially by the sole discretion of the person that they are raising representations against. As noted, our hands are often tied by the planning scheme, and so in terms of fighting for constituents, this is one of the many things that are going to have to change. But we know that the window of the 42 days has been increasingly abused, or maybe not abused, but timed very deliberately. And now that this matter has been raised in the public, could potentially get worse. So that does feel like it speaks to the urgency of the issue. So in my view, it is necessary for us to move on this quickly, and we must do what we can to ensure constituents have their views heard.
Thank you, Councillor Darko. Deputy Mayor, right of reply, please.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Yes, I thank colleagues for their contributions and their input into the debate. Just a couple of things in reply. In respect of Section B, I would hope to keep that included. I don't think anything turns on it in terms of the practicalities of what the motion achieves in terms of the mechanics of what we're asking it to do ultimately. But the reason it's there is because it is about recognising an opportunity, a capacity of the councillors was removed. I found out that this motion had been dealt with by delegation as a result of a phone call to the planners, the planning department, where I was actually inquiring about some of the representations I'd received and the possibility of drafting a refusal motion. That's what I was interested in, and at that point I was told, well, that you won't be getting that opportunity because we will be dealing with it by delegation tomorrow. So the reason, and I'm not the only person that was in that boat, so I felt it was important to mention that those steps were removed as opportunities for us, and I certainly would have intended and would have loved to have had the opportunity to debate some of the provisions that were put forward as part of the proposal. That opportunity was lost to me. If you want to speak to the reasons that we're here in terms about the importance and the urgency of these motions, we've talked about what I think has been described quite accurately as active misuse of the provision, and I think that's a reality that requires addressing as soon as we possibly can. But what better thing to stand up for than the erosion of our capacity to stand here and represent those people that elect us for items that should be coming to us and are not, through the provisions that are there at the moment. If we don't stand up for that, I'm not quite sure what we should think is particularly important to us, because and how often we're going to start to see this pattern, and my advice is that it has increased. So that is also very troubling. And by the time we get this through workshop, and of course I don't necessarily want to rush that, so dealing with it tonight, we can take time in workshop to then get it back and then be in a position to take something to the local government association. Don't want to miss that opportunity to do that. So hence, that's why it's been brought on. I would like to also say I appreciate the input from the CEO and the planning staff in providing commentary and explanatory notes around the provisions. That's been very helpful in putting all this together, and I appreciate it. And I would ask colleagues for their support for the entire 3 parts of the motion. Thank you.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Colleagues, as indicated, I will put this motion ad seriatim sequentially, A, B and C. And I'll first move part A of the motion. All those in favour? That's unanimous, thank you. Part B of the motion. And that's also... and part C of the motion. There we go.
Well summed up, Deputy.
Thank you. Very persuasive. So that's moved as that urgent motion. So thank you very much, colleagues, for that. Moving now on to item number 10, councillor question times. There's questions on notice from Councillor Hume. Moving on to 10.2, answers to questions on notice. CEO, thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. The first question on notice from Councillor Hume was, has the Tasmanian Government provided Council with any expected timeframes for work on South Arm Road between Pass Road and Acton Road, brackets the Rokeby Stage 3 corridor plan, including upgrading the intersection between South Arm Road and Acton Road? Through you, Mayor, request that Mr. Graham answer that
Mr.
question.
Ross Graham.
Yes, through you, Mr. Mayor. So we understand the Department of State Growth are underway with planning work for the Rokeby Road upgrade, and will be in the coming months be undertaking some consultation. It is understood their initial estimates are for construction to be underway in 2026. The department officers are certainly talking to us about informing councillors through a workshop in due course on the project.
Thank you, Mr. Graham. And the second question, please, CEO.
Thank you, Mayor. The second question is in relation to the Work Health and Safety Review, and there are 4 sub-questions. Has Council accepted the recommendation of Edge Legal's Work Health and Safety Review prepared for the Local Government Association of Tasmania? If not, which recommendations are not accepted and why? What is the process? What progress has been made towards implementing the recommendations Council has accepted? And what else is Council doing to avoid or minimise psychosocial risks to elected representatives, staff, volunteers, contractors and members of the public in council workplaces, including but not limited to bullying, harassment, discrimination and violence? I'll provide an answer to that. In late 2021, Council engaged Edge Legal to conduct a work health and safety review in relation to our own workplace. This was separate to the investigation and report commissioned by LGAT, which came after our report was completed. At its meeting of the 21st of March 2022, Council noted the recommendations of the executive summary of the confidential and legally privileged Clarence elected members' workplace environment report and referred the recommendations to a Council workshop for further consideration. Council, at its meeting of the 25th of July 2022, adopted a statement of expectations and issues a resolution procedure as complementary documents to support the Clarence Code of Conduct. Clarence elected members' workplace environment review report was undertaken to investigate and understand the range of issues influencing and affecting elected members and executive staff. The report included a draft statement of expectations and a draft councillor resolving disputes policies, which was the document from the report that formed the basis of our refinement and later approval of the documents I mentioned earlier.
Thank you, Chief Executive Officer. Moving now on to 10.3, answers to questions without notice, previous council meeting, and they're as listed in our agenda papers. Moving on to questions without notice. Are there any questions from the floor, starting this evening with the Deputy Mayor, Councillor Ritchie?
No, Mr Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Mulder.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. My question relates to the, speaking of controversial developments, the Skylands Master Plan Structure Plan. That plan, the final version of that plan, which was rejected by this council and appears to have been adopted by the minister, contained a suggestion that alternative routes to the north, to Norla Street, to the Norla Street crossover, would be part of the structure plan. In other words, outside the area of that particular structure plan, but because of Norla Road there was some thing. I have yet to have any indication of what the planners had in mind as to what that other northern route would be, and I've previously suggested laid on the table. So my question is the connection from Rokeby through Sunray Court, I believe it is, to Oceana Drive, over which there is already a reservation relating to the water tower. Is that under active consideration as one of those alternatives?
Chief Executive Officer.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Councillor Mulder. I'm not in a position to give a definitive answer at this point in time. What I can say, and to update Council, is that Ms Olsen and other staff have been working with the proponents and the Friends of Tranmere to organise a process to resolve those outstanding issues. We've been through a process of trying to clarify what those issues are, and there are a range of them, and we're now starting to work through a resolution process, and that will be one of them.
Your second question, thank you, Councillor Mulder.
Second question relates to the same topic. I won't try to pretend it's a supplementary, but it relates to the question is there a capacity in the negotiations for the cost of that construction to be allocated to the proponents of Skyline, since we're saving them a lot of money by not requiring them to build Norla Street?
Thank you. CEO.
I don't think I'm able to answer that at this point in time. There'll be a range of factors that go into that sort of consideration.
Councillor Hume.
Thank you, Mayor. If I may, I'm just going to refer back to my question on notice regarding the Workplace Health and Safety Review, and just to provide some context, the catalyst for this question was attending a session of the Legat Professional Development Day where they were talking about the responsibility of councils and also councillors in terms of having robust processes for dealing with issues throughout the workplace, psychosocial risks. I thank the CEO for his answer, which focused fairly heavily on Edge Legal's report on council, and that my understanding from the CEO's answer is that's very much about the conduct of councillors. But I would just ask if the CEO could perhaps take on notice and provide a comprehensive answer also in terms of what's being done across the entire workplace.
Certainly. Thank you, Councillor Hume.
Unless I misunderstood your answer, sorry.
No, thank you. Through you, Mayor, I might need to speak to you separately just to get a bit more detail. I'm not entirely clear what you're asking for, but we can sort that out.
Do you have a second question, Councillor Hume? Councillor James, do you have a question?
Yes,
two. Excellent.
Firstly, we have received in this collection of us a correspondence from the Bevans at Lauderdale regarding barking dogs. I know it's really got into a situation where there have been delays and so on, but my question, Mr Mayor, is given that this has been on the books and council has been approached for well over 12 months and there doesn't seem to be resolution to date, and I'm just quoting from a memorandum from them, from the Bevans to us in June 26th. My question to the responsible officer.
Questions to me. We'll discuss
to
this.
you. Thank you. As when will resolution of this occur, and when will the Bevans be advised accordingly?
Thank you, Councillor James. Mr Brennan, are you able to assist with an answer, please?
I've been speaking to the staff this morning. It's my understanding that when they first spoke to the person with concern, they asked for their complaint to be withdrawn, and that's the delay, but I'll investigate it further and give you a more comprehensive answer if that's okay.
Okay. Yeah, thank you, Mr Brennan. Your second question, thank you, Councillor James.
Yes, it's in relation to Julie Collins's memorandum, particularly in relation to the Mornington roundabout, and it seems as though that the state governments the state government and the federal government are responsible for delivery of infrastructure projects, and Julie Collins and the Labor federal government are working in conjunction with the state government to progress work on the Mornington roundabout upgrade. So my question through you my question to you, Mr Mayor, is in relation to what involvement will council have, as any, given that Cambridge Road junction with the South Arm Highway on both the eastern and western approaches are council roads, and therefore is it going to be a joint effort from federal, state and local in relation to getting something done about the Mornington roundabout?
Thank you, Councillor James. And we'd all be aware that the last federal election, the Honourable Julie Collins MP, the member for Franklin, did secure some federal funds to assist with the Mornington roundabout upgrade. There's also a requirement, as you've stated, for the state government to contribute as well. But Mr Graham, are you able to provide a more thorough answer as to council's involvement in the project, please?
Through you, Mr Mayor, council will be a key stakeholder on this project. Some of the initial analysis work, certainly our staff were informed through workshops in terms of looked at the proposals for that. We understand the state government and the feds are actually trying to define what the scope will be, and we haven't heard any further update probably for the last 4 months or so. But we certainly will liaise with the department officers.
Thank you, Mr Graham. Thank you. Councillor Goyne. Councillor Darko. Councillor Warren.
Thank you. I just have one question on behalf of a constituent. I believe there's been an increase in roadkill on Belrive Bluff, Powdermelons, and I wonder if that's just anecdotal or whether the rangers have observed that. And I understand there's some discussions about signage and wonder where we're up to with that as well.
Thank you. Mr Graham?
Mr Mayor, I'll take that one on notice. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Councillor Warren. Councillor Chong? Councillor Kennedy? All right. Well, I'll now call for a motion to move into closed meeting. Thank you. Move Councillor Chong, seconded Councillor Warren. I'll put that motion. Thank you very much. Thank you to those members of the public who've attended this evening, either in person or via the live stream. We'll now enter the closed section of the meeting, so I'll ask the feed to be cut, please. We look forward to seeing you in 3 weeks' time.